Today, we're talking about what happens when you get that call, that email, that LinkedIn message, the social post from the angry clients. Oh, the client is mad. Now, I know this may surprise you. You probably think, Matthew, Kenji, you guys at Acuity have never had angry clients. Well, you'd be wrong, and that'd be foolish to think. We know that you, fellow friends and accountants, yes, you've had these angry clients too. So we're going to talk about what do you do as a firm owner when you hear this? What do you do with your team? Like, how do you handle that? I will even talk about, are there ways to get ahead of this stuff and be a little proactive and try to mitigate this? But the angry client, this will be a fun one. Let's hope we have some high ABV beers today here on Drink While You Think, the Happy Hour podcast, where a couple of bozos like us talk about the weird ways we are building our firm. Got my co-host there, Matthew. I'm your host, Kenji. Matthew, who do we have sponsoring today?
Today's episode is sponsored by VerifyIQ. Practice management begins with quality. And now, sales enablement begins with quality. Check out Sales IQ on VerifyIQ's website, verifyiq.co.
Nice.
And these are soft t-shirts now. So
if
extra
you're not
bonus
watching
points.
on YouTube, you're missing out. Look at that sweet shirt.
Yeah, extra bonus points when you send us beer for sponsorship. If you send a soft t-shirt, extra bonus points. So what are you drinking, dude?
I'm going with, this is Gate City's Citras Maximus. It's actually dripping all over my laptop right now. Look at that. It's the beads of condensation.
Is Gate City the brewery?
Yeah, Gate City in Roswell.
Okay.
That is a Citra Pale Ale. This should be pretty good, but boy, look at that. I'm sitting outside today, and it's just
sweating. I'm sitting inside and mine's sweating. So I'm going real fancy. You look at this sealed, wax
look at
sealed
what's
top.
going on there, Matthew.
Okay, so this is from one of my favorite breweries from Wrecking Bar, the Siberius Maximus. So it's a barrel-aged Russian Imperial Stout. So this one's a 12.8%er, and you see it's in the larger.
Golly.
This is the full 500 milliliter. So I'm gonna do the
while you're doing that, Matthew, I'll tell you this. I didn't tell you what we were talking about today, angry clients, but when I said you better have a strong beer, you knew. You were somehow figured this out. That is a heavy ABV, and it's going to be a big pour. That's
also, I'm going on vacation when we get off this call.
Oh, are you?
So technically, I'll be on vacation for my parents' 50th wedding anniversary.
That's very nice. Gotta like that. And also, what's kind of cool too, from a branding perspective, we're both drinking beers that are something Maximus. That was not planned either.
That was not planned either.
The Citrus Maximus, and yours is the Siberian Maximus.
By Siberius.
By Siberius. Very cool. Let's see this pour. Don't be drinking that out of the bottle.
Oh, no. I brought a cup for you just because I knew you would say that.
Well, attaboy. That's what you want. Let that sucker breathe. Get that. There you go. You want a little bit of that nose, that aroma to hit. Plus, look how pretty that is pouring into that. I go opposite beers.
Does that look like about my color beer? Cheers, man.
And I got one of my color beers. Cheers, dude. How's that?
This is I can tell you the rating already. This is this is my so you had a bad day beers. This is one of the 5s that gets you back. I did not have a bad day today though, so
it can be used for getting you ready for vacation and for good days too. But let's see if I can make your
clients.
Let's see if I can make your day bad by talking about grumpy, angry clients. All right. It happens. It happens to all of us. If it hasn't happened to you yet, the only thing I can say is your firm's too small. I shouldn't say that's not very nice. There may be some out there who just do an exceptional job of their clients all love them. I think the last person I heard that said all their clients love them was Lori Lynn. I actually do believe that. I doubt there's been an angry client for Lori Lynn. There may be some folks on Twitter who occasionally get a little bit upset with her, but those aren't clients. I love her being spicy out there. That said, it happens. Right? Even clients we're not serving, it bubbles up, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, inbox blows up, phone call or something happens and it bubbles up to you, the firm owner. What is your natural instinct when you see that? Like, what's your kind of like, what happens when you see that angry client come through?
Oh, I think this is terrible. I think you got to stay out of this trap as a firm owner. I mean, it's an okay perspective, but I just think of all of the things that I should have done to prevent that from happening. Whether it's training the team or having better processes or fixing something, I immediately like that's where I immediately
So
go.
if I'm hearing you right, you're saying, "Oh man, this is my fault."
It's all my fault. Like, and that's fair. So because if it's a bad staff, like if it's somebody that goes to the client, right? Because that never happens to anybody. If it theoretically, but if one of your employees was to ghost a client, like, shouldn't you have hired better? Shouldn't you have paid attention to something that happened in their life? Shouldn't you have been like, shouldn't you be aware? Should you have a system to catch that? Like, how's that not on us, the firm owner? Like, I can't,
That's
I have yet.
awfully optimistic, Matthew. That's awfully pie in the sky, but people aren't always on the up and up. They're not always, people make mistakes. Sometimes people are bad. Not always, but sometimes. But you still think that you still feel like, man, that first response is, this has got to be on me.
Oh, well, that's where my head goes originally, and I have to get back. So from tactically, I'm like, okay, next step. Like, so there's a couple of varieties of this, right? You're probably going to talk about some of them, like the 1-star Google review, the creeper on social media, the just email or phone call you get that you have no context on,
Well,
the
let's back up a
the
second, right? So,
escalation,
yeah,
the
yeah. Let's
escalation to you through your team. Like, there's several varieties of
There's
you,
a
and
lot of
each of
varieties,
them,
but before you even know the variety, right? Okay, you talked about the feeling, and I get that. And I agree with you. That first feeling is, oh, we dropped the ball. We messed something up, and it's probably on
yeah.
me. And I agree with you. I think that's natural as a firm owner because this is your entity, this is your organization. Yep, something didn't go right. It's got to be on me. That's not bad, but you're right. You probably shouldn't wallow in it and let you get too stuck there. Like, now, what's the next step? Like, let's say it's an email has come into your inbox, and Matthew, your team sucks. I'm disappointed. Okay, you got through the feeling. What's your next step? What do you typically do?
So I like to as quickly as possible respond that I'm going to follow up on it, right?
Yeah, how do you do that?
Either email if I've never met the person in their life, phone call if it's somebody that's in the network or Atlanta usually, and say, hey, I got this. Like, stop the bleeding a little bit, right? Every time I don't respond same day, even if it's to say I'm looking into it, it goes bad.
So let me pause there real quick. So you're saying before you even have context, let's say you don't even know what the hell's going on, you like to actually just get a response back of some sort before you've done the investigative work. You like to respond.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I'm one of the people that doesn't mind actually talking to somebody on the phone without all the information.
Right.
I'm like, we're a big enough firm now, like, you, like, especially if they know us, like, you got to respect that I've got to go fact find. Like, I acknowledge usually on that call, like, I'm, if you're feeling that way, I'm sure that feeling is valid, but I'm sure there's lots of information I have to get to figure out what to do next.
Yeah.
And if I do get them, I do ask, like, them, like, sometimes, like, what what does it take to get over this? Like, do I need to change staff people? Are you asking for a credit? Like, are you just upset? Like, I literally ask them that sometimes. You just want me to listen to you? Like, like, what makes this better? Like, what's a positive outcome from here, knowing that likely something got screwed up? And
So you're saying you go, okay, get the feeling over, you get a pretty quick response, like let's respond. And then if you get them, doesn't sound like there's like, hey, tell me what went wrong. It's more like you're putting them in the headspace of, hey,
how do we
just
go?
tell me what the solution might look like,
Yeah,
or what
I
you're
already,
thinking of.
and
Try to getting in that posture.
yeah, and when I talked to him, I said, I'm sure this is our fault. Like, I'm sure I should have done something better. Even if our team did everything right, I probably should have fixed the communication on that. Like, I try to take it off the team and onto me as quickly as possible. And that's disarming to them usually. Like that
I
changes
agree.
like I'm trying to change the tenor as fast as possible to how do we move forward to get off of you guys suck,
Right.
right? Like we may have sucked, we may have not sucked. I'm not even gonna argue that with you. I'm sure if we definitely sucked. If you think we sucked, we sucked. So what's next, right? Like as quickly as possible with whatever strategy I think works at the time, depending on the relationship I have with the person.
Right.
So
So you get through that part of it. I mean, I assume then, are you moving into a little bit of fact finding internally?
I do a little bit of, well, depending if we can just get over it. Like sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes they just want to complain. Like if they're talking $500, like I'm done. Like if a $500 credit, like for some knit, like that's worth, like the fact finding is going to cost more than the $500, right?
Yeah.
Like from a productivity and people feeling shitty and all that kind of stuff. So like depending on like I 2 out of 10 I can resolve on the call. Right. So I'm trying to at least kill some of them. And
Right.
then 8 out of 10 we're doing some fact finding. Right.
Okay.
Especially
And
now.
what does that look like at the 8 out
Like
of 10?
back in
Like
the
how do you start
day,
that?
like 5 out of 10 I could fix on the call. Now it's like 2 out of 10
Yeah,
because
that's about
usually
right.
the ones that come to us now are a little like they're like somebody else has usually talked to them. Like
They've had
either
to,
that or they're
yeah,
Atlanta folks, right?
they've had to work their way up through a little bit of a chain. It's not like,
Except for
folks
the
don't.
people that know us personally that skip
Correct.
everything.
Yeah, there are a few of those. That's okay. That's just part of it.
It's
But
part of it.
yeah, part of it. So the 8 out of 10, then I guess now at that point, we're back in doing some fact finding. Okay, let's figure out to the best of our ability what happened. Do you have a,
I
in
do.
that, yeah, what's kind of you, do you have an approach when it gets to that? Like, all right,
I do. And a lot of time I do this before I call them back. I go and look at relatively speaking how much we've billed them over the last year.
okay. So interesting. So you're like, let me hear the
Well,
financial side
like
of it.
how pissed off can you be if we've charged you $1,000 in the last year?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, like that helps me get some context on like, oh shit. Like, and sometimes a lot of time it's like, oh, my bill, like we get a lot of like, oh, your bill's too high on the hourly stuff, right? Or somebody didn't do proper expectation setting. Or usually that's the excuse they use because most of the time people aren't pissed unless they're in a cash crunch and then they're pissed. But that's just an observation. uh,
Probably a fair one.
um, so I bet frequently I do this search before. Sorry, this you can tell I don't prep for Kenji's questions. So I probably do the search before I call them of like order of magnitude, how big of a client are they to
Yeah.
Acuity? Like, hey, okay, did they bill 50,000 or 12,000? Like I need to know, kind of relatively speaking.
Yeah. Gotcha. Anything else you do before you start kind of getting some communicating with team members? Anything else you do kind of independently?
Sometimes I go into Salesforce and see how pain in the ass they've been. Like, because usually if they've opened a bunch of tickets and they're problematic, you can see that. Sometimes I'll
Yeah.
join our Slack channel on the team and just scan it.
That's the one I typically do is I'm like, I just go quickly into the Slack channel. We do have a Slack channels for every client. We have at Acuity, we have some that are internal only for the client and some with the client. And those are not bad ones to go into. Like, all right, let's just go through a scan and see, try to pick up some context and some communication rhythms. And like you can pick out if there's any friction or things in there sometimes.
Well, one of the things I also do when I'm in QuickBooks, I see how much money they owe us.
Okay. Yeah.
Because one of the times this happened, we had billed them $30,000, but they'd never paid any bills.
Yeah.
So like you're like, why are you like you've never paid us, so like you don't get to complain really right now. So until you start paying bills, well, that helps too. Like the first time I
It
talked to him is like, hey,
sure.
like I get we did bad service, you don't pay us. Like I don't even care if we did bad service since you didn't pay us. We paid
Yeah.
you. We
We,
did
we don't have
better.
high enough. We don't have high enough bill rates that we ran it up that much in like 1 or 2 weeks. That's a long time that, yeah, we've been
Oh
out doing
no.
some work and for
But
people
like,
not to, yeah.
we had, well, I'm not going to
It
keep talking about
happens.
I'm worried about talking about specific ones, but like,
Yeah, let's not do that. Let's keep specific ones out of there. So, okay, once the fact finding's been done, do you usually have, once you've done that, you've taken a look at the financials, you've kind of teased out some things out of the engagement that if through Slack channels or through Salesforce or whoever, your firm might be picking up data about it. Do you typically set up a meeting with any team members? Do you just communicate over Slack? How do you start once you get
I,
out of data side? How do you get into the people's?
well, I typically, if I'm going to talk to somebody or call somebody, like, I'll call Lisa, or I'll call Sammy, or I'll call Taylor. These are COO, our head of bookkeeping, our head of accounting. Like, those are historically the people that had context. Depending on if I knew for some reason that they had interacted, or just checking to see if they've ever interacted with people before, or sometimes
Right.
I'm the point of escalation off of two of those folks, right? Off of Sammy and Taylor. Usually if it goes to Lisa, we never get it because she fixes it just like we can fix it. Like, I mean, if you get to me, you or Lisa, like, there's no,
There's no
okay, if you
next
want to
step after
escalate, you're
that.
just
Yeah.
pissed,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Um, so with those other two, I might call them or ping them directly. I tend to freak, like, I don't know why. Maybe I don't. You probably do too. Like, if you were to hit like one of the engagement team members, like, that might freak them out more than anything. But I might post something general in Slack saying, "Hey, we got a complaint for so and so. I understand, they're a high maintenance client. Like, I'm trying to get some context and before a phone call with them. Does anybody have anything that's happened recently?
Yeah.
Or if there's something specific I knew, I'll post it in the channel." And then once that's there, I'm not gonna freak them out. Then I'm like, because I don't know what other
Yeah,
firms
the
do or
context
where
there for
people.
other firm owners, and again, these are probably ones of some scale and size. Is if you're not interacting with your team all the time, or that client, and all of a sudden you swoop in and say, "Hey, we got a new client I hear about." That's Matthew's point about freaking people out. Like they don't really interact with you that often. All of a sudden, the big boss is calling saying, "Hey, we got an upset client," and
Oh yeah,
it's a little bit, yeah.
when we were 30 people, I could go and say, "Hey, what's going on?"
Let's sit down and talk about them. Yeah,
After we got past 50 people, like, I started freaking people out when I did that, so I had to shift to kind of like a new approach to where you informed them of something softer, like, "Hey, I'm data gathering, like, don't freak out." I don't know how the big companies work, but man, people think you're just gonna fire them straight out of the gate. So
yeah,
you have to be
really,
mindful of that after probably about 50 people. For those of you
yeah,
out there, like, that's one big change when you start getting bigger, is after you're like 50 people and people don't kind of know you personally. Um, you've got to really you got to really be careful because other people have treated them bad in the past. A lot of people,
right. And
you know.
oftentimes the client maybe has too, right?
Well, and we know
So
the clients that complain generally aren't. Well, that's not true. So, like, we've had good
they
clients
can be.
complain,
We've had good clients complain for valid reasons. I mean, I think
but
there's
the,
typically almost
the
always
bad
a
clients typically complain more, right?
correct. They
So
find
you just
something to
can't.
complain about. Yeah.
You got to figure out which kind it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think typically what we find is there's just a values misalignment sometimes with the way that client works and the way we work and the way that we handle things with our people and the way they do. And that's confusing sometimes, as a firm. You can't always, it's hard to vet for uh, values with a
Yep.
client all the time. And so you have, and again, when you're a CAS firm like we are, your your staff almost becomes a pseudo staff of their firm. And so it
Yep.
is interesting. They're kind of bridging this gap of where there's two different work environments. And when those are in conflict, it can be tough. It can
Yep.
make a difference for sure. So what are we, well, I say what do we typically find in the hierarchy of like what are clients angry about? Like what are the top couple things that typically clients are upset about?
A lot of it is recently, and recently in the last 3 years, with the staff turnover, the clients, like most clients, regardless of whether it's true or not, grasp onto that change. Like, people hate change. So as
Yeah.
soon as you change a person on their team, man, they hold on to that, and they're like, you owe
Any
me money.
transition
You owe
is
me
tough.
money no matter what. Like, it doesn't matter if you do it well or poorly or
Yeah.
whatever.
Why
Like,
can't that person get up to speed quickly? They're not as good as the other person. It's very
if they get
difficult.
one extra question in that time frame that's a little off, or you have somebody mismanaging it,
Yeah.
or if you have a controller that likes to do something differently than the previous controller, and they do a offhand remark about, like, I gotta go clean up all this stuff that's wrong. Like, when you're like, you have no context that we weren't doing gap books before at the instructions of the person, you can't go tell them it's all wrong just because it's non-gap. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
well, I think a lot of that is communication and training people, like what services we're offering people. This is where it comes back to us, right? Like, when we did a lot of times when people leave and they're leaving more and more abruptly, it doesn't allow for smooth transitions. For client transitions, we've had recently, employees leave that are 30 years into their career, like, that aren't giving notice and are kind of ghosting as soon as they resign, which blows my mind. Like, doing client service in that environment is very difficult, especially if they weren't complying with some of the, like, where we're supposed to, like, and then not, or if we don't have access to some of the files or something like that, then that gets really, really difficult. So those transition issues seem to be like number
Brutal.
one theme right now, just because the last 3 years has been so brutal with people changing jobs so fast. I think most firms are feeling this, like, where more people are changing jobs the last 3 years than we can remember ever in the history of the world.
Strong causality with any transition. You can look at it and say, yep, that's going to trigger the churn meter to go up a little bit, negative sentiment on NPS or any other responses, and just overall unhappiness. It's not easy.
The other one is
What's that?
which always drove me nuts, is like other firms being mean. So like because we don't proactively try to get the tax work from our CAS clients, and we have this trouble all the time when these firms go through mood swings that are in the tax return. They'll like snipe at us because they're pushing a new tax practice internally, and they'll snipe and be like, these are all the things that your CAS team is doing wrong over at
Oh,
Acuity.
yeah.
Like, why don't you bring it to us?
Do you feel like I feel like we used to get that one a lot more? I don't know. Do we still get some now? You feel like?
Well, I mean, we started a tax practice to kibosh that. So now
Yeah.
we have
Yeah. There's some
250 of
defense for
those.
that. We're more on the hook
250
for it, but
that was defensive, right? So
right.
like 250 of those like got kiboshed because we dealt with. Um
Yeah.
Man, but at the end of the day, like, regardless of what happened, I would say 97% of our issues I boil down to communication.
You think it's that low? No,
Like,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding, but it's
I'm gonna give it 3% other, but 97% is control didn't communicate, bookkeeper didn't communicate, CFO didn't communicate, firm didn't communicate transition well, you didn't set expectations well. Like business owners are relatively reasonable if you communicate.
right. And I'll
Like,
go back to
even difficult business owners.
oh sure. I'll go back to what you said to start with. And this is something we've tried to with our team. It's very difficult. But if you, as a firm owner, can get this built into your DNA as a team, not just the communication, but the high responsiveness. I think you talked about the very get-go. The first thing you do is you respond. Respond in some way. I acknowledge there's something wrong here. Let me get on it. And I think that's probably one of the number one things you can do across, your team or anyone can do is say, hey, let me give you an update. Like, okay, cool, I got it. Let's start giving some timelines about how we're going to maybe communicate again, how we're going to fix things, and just be quick and responsive. It is disarming, which is good. That's what you want to do, is you want to flip the script a little bit, but nothing good happens when you're not communicating well. And so often that communication it's just, there's a lack of communication. And what I'll say, I've seen a mistake that we've made before is team members are attempting to do the right thing and fix something and do the right and say, let's get this right, let's go fix this. But they're doing it in a bit of a black box without the client knowing about it. And they're going, okay, I'm trying to get, we have to switch a team member on this. We have to fix something. I'm working on it. They're doing that, but they're not communicating back to the client. They're not giving an
Right.
update. And that just lack of a response is infuriating. It's infuriating to me, or any one of us when we've got an issue. We're like, I don't even know if someone's listening to me, or I have no idea the timeline. First step is communicating well. I think it's being very responsive and timely communication will help tremendously.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that, like, the big thing in addition to communication that blows my mind, and I would say I'm going to give it 95% of the situations, is that all of the communication that did happen before the problem was 100% email. No video, no phone calls, no context, people escalating over email, people misinterpreting tone, like crazy shit that you should just pick up the phone and fix, right? Back in the day.
Just pick it up and do it. I know that's not the way that the youth of today, people like to communicate in different means, but it's, even if you don't want to be in that one-on-one, I mean, pop a quick video message, something, get something face-to-face, which is disarming.
Something where you have visual
people feel
cues and
empathetic, or audible cues. It makes a
tone,
world difference. I'd say that
sympathy, like
the other
show
thing
that you give a shit, right?
right. The other thing that this one's more for the firm owners out there, right? Because when things come to you and I, we're typically not involved directly in the engagement. And so there's a bit of like, what can you do to help? Well, there's always the buck stops here with the owner and et cetera. But I think what's interesting for us is, and probably most of the firms who are listening, we serve other small businesses, and actually firm owners are small business owners too. There's an opportunity there to build some commonality and go, yep, you probably messed something up. Let me listen and learn here. We were talking about this, and my really good close friend George Clooney said this from Expensicon. I joke. And Lisa and I talked about, we liked this quote of it. He said, I never learned anything from being right. And it's a great reminder of there's an opportunity to learn something. And so you kind of go to that business owner and say, hey, we probably screwed something up. What can I learn from this? Can you help me? And then you kind of get on their side and say, gosh, yeah, we're scaling right now. We're growing a bunch. We just lost some people in whatever team. We're having a tough go of it. Tell me more about how that impacted you. And you can build some empathy real quick that's unique as a firm owner, because pretty quickly, I've almost every time I've done this with another business owner, they're like, oh man, that reminds me of when we lost people a few years ago. We had this issue. And next thing you know, you're suddenly on the same page with them. You're like, you're kind of commiserating about being business owners, like, oh, it is hard and it is difficult. And they can see the business and the team in a little bit of a different light. That's something unique, I think, that firm owners can do. I worry about that. I sometimes, when we jump into this, I meddle with the process and I screw things up and I make it harder for the team. I've done that. When I've done it well, it's been more of a, hey, I've been the one person who can get on the same page, the business owner, and they're like, oh yeah, I gotta get it. They start seeing through more empathetic eyes of, I'm an entrepreneur like you are. And yep, I remember we had the scale issues, and I've had some like, oh, you should try this out next time. Or some are very good about constructive criticism if you get them in that posture. But when you're not responding and they don't feel like you're doing anything, they're not going to be, it's not going to be constructive criticism. They're just going to be pissed. And so if you can get them there, boy, it flips the script a bit.
But this is kind of unique. Well, this may not be unique to me, like you and me generally, but like, I would say that's not a tactic. You can't fake that.
No, you can't fake that.
Like, that has to be your style, and that's your and my style.
Yeah.
So like other firm owners, if they're going to do that, like other business owners, like if you're faking it, they know.
Yeah, they know it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, for us, it's I think I would hope that most good firm owners, entrepreneurs are going to be open to taking some feedback. There's going to be some who aren't. That's okay. But I know seriously. I mean, obviously, we
You
talked
know what I
about probably
mean?
the most
Like
unique
this is not
company, the
building a
most unique
playbook.
company value we have, right? Is what is being curious. That's our
Curious.
unique company value, and that is true. It's a very thing. We are very curious in many ways, and I am curious about every time someone bitches or complains. There's and it may be almost all on them. There's some element of something there to be learned, something to be gained, and like going into eking out that little bit, even if that person is a jackass and are being rude, whatever, there's something there to get out of that conversation. If you can kind of get them there, maybe they never get on your side or not, but in many cases they get more quickly on your side than you think. And that's something I think that's fairly unique at the higher levels of the organization. That's a way I always think about how helping our team. Like, oh, how can Kenji help as the CEO who's not involved in the engagements? Like, oh, if I can disarm them a little bit and get the client to bring the blood pressure down, to get them in a posture of where they're thinking constructively, then we can smooth some things out. But I just offer that as
100%.
one of them. Yeah.
100%. But I'm just saying, like, that's not a tactic. You know what I mean? Like, that's like, you have to believe that. Like,
You
you
do.
have to be willing to make a change. You have to be willing to be curious to take that approach.
Yeah.
Like, that's all I'm saying. Like,
So
at a big firm, that probably doesn't work. Like at a
it may
mega
not. It
firm,
may not.
right? Like if this is one of our peers, like somebody that has a CAS practice, that they're the firm owner and they're trying to get better, 100%. That's
Yeah.
my
I
only
mean,
that's my only thing with that is like,
I think so. And I think that's where it probably does make more sense. Cause I mean, our livelihood, our lives kind of depend on it in certain ways. Like it's important to figure out if we're making bad mistakes, it is very important. We don't get to go on to the next job really as firm owners. Like we're stuck with it. It's a Brittany Brown thing, right?
yeah,
Brittany Brown always said, it's the benefit of being an employee is you get to leave whenever you want. When
we've
you're an
seen
owner,
that
you
the
just
last
don't. Like
years.
you just don't. So you're stuck with it, and you better learn from it. And you better make it work and listen. Um, all right, let's kind of maybe finish on one last thing, and then we'll kind of wrap up and rate some beers. Um, what do you think? Like proactively, like we're talking about reactive things here. If you were to think about a couple of things, like okay, what do you do to get ahead of some of these? It's hard. Like, can you look at data or different things to give indications like, ooh, we may have something going wrong? Do we look at, surveys, or they're just processes you build that earn you street cred for when things do go wrong? How do you think about the proactive side of like, oh, let's just not have angry clients. Let's not have people get pissed and blow up our email. What are there some things you can think about that may mitigate that angry client
I mean,
happening in the first place?
you're coming off our our offsite retreat.
I
You
am.
and me talked
That's why
about
it's our
this, and
topic.
like,
Yeah.
so I just feel we have a long way to go here. Like
Incredible.
I just like it's so much as a firm owner just to be responsive with how we've built the pricing and how we built the client service and stuff like that.
Okay, real quick, let me say one thing there. I think it's important. I mean, to me, is the word you use responsive. We talked about responsive a lot. I think for us at Acuity, our top core value is being measured. And we talk about that very clearly to the team members of being responsive, not reactive, right? Responsive, not reactive. We do need to be quick. We need to be thoughtful and intentional. And we need to be responsive, not just reactive with our emotions and feelings. We need to be responsive. So anyway, I just pause there, especially for OPD team members listening, is the importance of that being measured of like, yep, it's quickly to respond, but you're doing it thoughtfully. Anyway, keep going.
So I think this goes back to like why we got involved with VerifyQ, right?
Ooh, we're bringing our sponsor in. I like this into the.
Well, it's like everybody knows that I think we're involved with VerifyQ, so hopefully they know that we're just every time VerifyQ is a sponsor, we just want to shill for that. But
no one else has sent us beer is what it means.
And nobody else has sent us beers. But we did get the shirts coming off of Engage, so that was kind of nice. So like when we got excited about VerifyQ, when they were raising money before we kind of stepped in and took over kind of the product development there, what we saw was the potential to aggregate data that was actionable off like of the whole client base. So the problem we saw, like there's all kinds of problems, and I might be going too deep on this, KK, but like the problem we saw was like, sure, you can go and figure out, like you could scan and figure out like at a point in time, like what's my client's whatever cash balance or revenue or whatever at a point in time, and try to get everybody to pull it. But VerifyQ could capture that information for you when you knew the books were clean. So it only captured it once the books were clean. So what we've done there is like tried to identify, now it's on us though, right, as the firm owner, to say, okay, what are the things that trigger proactivity? I think that's the challenge with proactivity, right? It's not that we don't know what to do when somebody brings it up to us, is we don't know the indicators, and we may know the indicators. We haven't done enough thought as a profession about the indicators to track those to trigger some proactivity. That's my biggest gripe about our whole profession right now. And it's my biggest concern about Acuity right now, is we are so caught up with just doing what our clients ask us to do. We don't think long enough about what are the triggers in our industries that once they hit them, we should be reaching out to them and keeping them from making mistakes. And so like when I get into the like dream world of like we built this great company, it's a company that's identified the triggers, at least on an industry level, of what things start conversations that help prevent not all of these problems, that's ridiculous, but 50 to 80% of these problems, right?
Yeah.
Like what a cool goal, right? And I think as firm owners, we need to take stock of that a little bit and say, why is that we're so reactive? Why is that? Is it because we are trying to do too much on too many industries? Is it because we're trying to, if we don't price right? It's because there's several things. There's lots of things that kind of back into that, but like proactivity, I think all of us need to take a hard look about the industry we serve and spend more time thinking about what are some of the triggers we could track to like really move the needle for the entrepreneurs or the business owners that we serve. I don't know, maybe I'm too
No, I
I'm
mean,
too sappy or sympathetic.
I think you're embodying right now the Verify Q, model. You got the shirt on, you're ready to go. It is about there are things that we have that are unique to us as firms. We've got good data, and how do we use that in a way to facilitate discussions and to facilitate, like, how do we help think ahead a little bit, and I think there's good opportunity. There's maybe more than than we've thought of before, of being able to know in advance of what things a client might need before they even know us. We've got some of the data there and some of the tools, but it's Verify IQ is one of the things. I think the data component is a thing that firms should really be considering. You've got maybe more than you can think than you thought you had to be able to determine everything from, okay, if we're not just gonna like, hey, is the quality of the file that we've been working on not very good? Yikes, this could create an issue. Or you're looking into like, golly, their cash balance has been dwindling. Their AR is getting out of control. There's some stress going on, right? That is something that just triggers the emotions of, hey, do we need to be more helpful there?
What are the
help with
financial
that.
things that we know that could trigger like something that we could do to help them?
Just to help them, right? And so I think
So
that,
like that was like,
yeah,
and just so you know, like for everybody out there, like Verify IQ is not gonna fix it. It's just going to give you information.
a few more
You're
slices
gonna have
of
to
data.
you're gonna have to know the triggers.
Right.
You have to tell the stupid tools out there Verify Q, Keeper, all these Scrutinize, whatever tools you're using, Zenit, like all these ones. I'm not trying to shill. Like any of these tools, you're gonna have to tell them what you want, and then you're gonna have to build it. Like
And
the
you're going to
action
take
plan,
action on it. That's the big thing is you got to take an action on it. You can't
or
just let
have
it
your people taking action on it.
in
Like,
some way. Yeah, you as an organization will. And I think that's where I'll add this to it. My take on it is thing experience has been that things go wrong. They always go wrong. It's life. And if you're going to get jammed up with the first thing that goes wrong and it's going to be a disaster and fiasco and everybody's upset at each other, it's not worth it. So almost preparing for something's going to go wrong. And I don't think that as in a negative way. I think actually there's great opportunities to, when things get tough, to show like, yep, we're going to be the accounting provider that leans in with you. We're going to help figure out and fix it. We're not going to run away from it. But I do think you need a few chips kind of on the table on our side. Like, right, there are some things you can do to earn some of those, like, hey, I think they're, the folks at Acuity just dropped the ball over there, but because this happened previously, or I have a relationship with someone, or I feel like I've connected to the brand, or they did something for me, you got a few cards up your sleeve that you may need those. You kind of need a few get out of jail frees. And that could be through anything. We were really challenging our team this week at our offsite to think about what that looks like. That's authentic to them. We don't want people doing things that feel inauthentic, but like, what could you do to let a client know that we do care? Some people are like, I'd love to get on the phone and talk to them about all kinds of things. Other people are like, that sounds horrible. Drop them a quick note, or you send them a cool industry thing to let them know you're thinking of it. It's just unexpected things that
fix a process.
fix a
Like
process or something. You just do something
something.
for them, a little something. And I do think you can have relationships at scale. I think that's possible. We're talking about one-on-one connections here. We're talking about some relationships at scale. And I think if you do that to kind of put a few things in the relationship bank, right, on our side, the show that we've tried there, it's going to help you in the long run in many ways, whether that's just, yikes, something went wrong, or even better case, and that helps absolve some mistakes that will happen, or even better, you put some deposits in there from the relationship side, and they go, we're scaling and growing. We got some really interesting things going on. I've got to keep using this team for some more work, for some more projects. Yeah. We've seen that happen. So I think using the data, and I think also finding ways to make some connection points and build some relational currency. And as Matthew said, we're a long way from that. We are I don't know many people who are doing that in a fantastic way because I think everyone right now is understaffed. There's too many clients. It's a little hard to do that, but it certainly is.
Too much turnover. Like,
it's the right way to go.
We need to start creating more headspace to do it as Smart Motors, like as a group. So
we do share some good ideas there. All right, let's rate some beers. What do you think?
Sounds great.
I've got mine pulled up, but I know you've already got yours ready to roll. Let me hold on one second here. Let's pull up.
So everybody should be a patron for Wrecking Bar. Forget following us. Like, just keep Wrecking Bar in business so that I have my Friday place to eat dinner.
Oh my gosh, Matthew. Yeah. By the way, Matthew, last night I ran into one of our good friends having dinner. Our good friends Brian Gordon and Logan, and I went over and spoke and said hi to them at their table. And they said, yeah, guess what? We went to Wrecking Bar, and of course we tried to reach out to Matthew and Laura to see if they were going to be there, and they didn't have their phones with them, and they were already there. So yes, Matthew, if you ever want to find Matthew and his lovely wife
on a Friday night, generally Friday night,
at the
Wrecking Bar in Candler Park in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay, let's get this out of the way here. Here's my Citras Maximus from Gate City Brewing. Getting a 3.0 for me. That's pretty low for me. I was not crazy about this. Citra is a hop I really like. It should be very fruity and floral and all that stuff, and it just is kind of blah.
It's just
not great. I was not a huge fan. So I'm excited more to hear about how do you spell it again? The first part is
Siberius.
No,
with an I. Dude,
sorry, I can't quite see it.
SIBERIUS. Maximus. There it is. Wrecking Bar.
Brewpub. I'm excited to hear about this guy. Look at the average. It's already 4.25. I'm going to start putting it up in the upper 4 zones just to prepare. What's it going?
All the way to 5.
5, baby.
This is my this is my beer, dude. This is how beers should be made.
Is
Like, and I'm actually not a big barrel aged person for stouts. And this one is this Russian Imperial Stout is my fave. So come down to Wrecking Bar if you're in Atlanta.
you want to get on Matthew May's good side, get him send him some Siberius Maximus or something that replicates this. That is
Yeah,
I like that. I like that bottle.
Don't be brave. Don't send a 6-pack, just a single. Like, you don't have to do that. Like,
no kidding, dude. You can't hand a 6-pack of those. You go through those, you'd be on the floor.
oh, you can't do those in one. You can't do a 6-pack in one day unless you're at the Falcons game.
I've seen you do that before.
I
think I had to
know.
pull you. I think I had to pull you out of the bushes.
No,
Anyway.
you didn't. You lie.
Maybe.
So.
Well, maybe not. Anyway, thanks for joining
Kenji
us.
lies, everybody. That's all you need to know.
That's all
So.
you need to know about this, but it makes for a good story. But cheers to everyone for joining us. Glad you could make it. Send us some more requests for things you'd love for us to talk about. And
you want to sponsor, send us beer.
Yeah. And follow and subscribe. So you don't miss the next episode of Drink While You Think. Thanks for being here, everybody. See you next time.